Noel, I just want to let you know that we'll be just kind of waiting for the next few minutes to get started at noon. We do have almost 200 folks registered, so we'll be inviting participants to keep themselves on mute during the call, and then use the chat function of Zoom in order to participate in asking questions of the panelists during the session. And you're welcome to type in a question at any time. Hillary Sager and I should show up once you find that chat box as hosts, and you can chat either of us, and we'll be moderating the Q&A throughout the webinar. So you're welcome to try out that chat function kind of while we wait for the webinar to get started, if you like. Welcome to the Oregon Trails Funding webinar. We will be getting started about noon. We will be using slides from various presenters for this webinar as opposed to using the video feature. So if you are interested in turning off your video share, you can probably find the button to do that near the bottom left of your screen. We're going to invite our participants to also keep their phones on mute, which you can do either using your phone's mute button or the mute button on the Zoom computer, on the Zoom platform. Either should work fine. And that's just because we have so many participants, we hope to minimize the background noise, and we'll be using the Zoom chat function for folks to send in questions for our presenters if you have them as we go. And you're welcome to send in a question via the chat function anytime. You can send those to Hillary Sager or Steph Knoll. You should both show up as hosts in your chat box. Welcome to those just joining us for the noon Oregon Trails Funding webinar. We'll be just waiting a few more minutes to get started. We are going to invite all of our participants to keep their phones on mute because we have so many people registered. So you can do that through either using your phone's mute button or also on your screen as part of the Zoom platform. You should see a kind of phone mute button on kind of the left-hand side of the little console. So either of those should work to keep you on mute. We will invite you to submit questions at any time throughout the webinar using the chat feature. So you can experiment with that right now while you're trying to get started, but you should be able to find the chat as part of the Zoom platform console as well, and you can send messages to Hillary Sager or I, and we'll moderate that and get those to our presenters as we go. All right, I just wanted to once again welcome everyone who's joining us for the Oregon Trails Funding webinar. We'll be getting started momentarily. Just want to let folks know that we have almost 200 people registered for today's webinar. So we're inviting all of our participants to keep their phone on mute so that we can cut down on background noise as much as we can, and everyone can hopefully hear well. So you can either mute your phone using your phone's mute button, or using the Zoom platform mute button will effectively mute you as well. But we do very much invite you to submit any questions that you have at any time during the webinar using the Zoom group chat function. So you should be able to find that chat box on kind of your mute or on your Zoom console. If you're having trouble locating that, click where you'll see 3 little dots with the word more, and you might be able to turn your chat on there if it's not already on. And yeah, so we'll be getting started in just a moment. I'll pass it off to our first presenter. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and especially thank all of our presenters for putting this information together for you all, and thank Hillary Sager and Travel Oregon for the technical and administrative support to make this webinar possible. We will have each presenter give an overview of the programs of their agency that can support trails, and they'll each speak just for about 8 to 10 minutes. You're welcome to submit a question at any time via chat, and depending on the timing of things, one of Hillary or I as moderators will either pass that question on to a panelist immediately after their section, or we'll also have some time at the end of the whole webinar. We're hoping to reserve the last 10 minutes or so for general questions. So if we don't get to your question earlier, we hope to get to it later on. And also this webinar hopefully will give you a general overview. It might not answer all of your questions about these programs, but hopefully you'll leave knowing where to find more information. So with that, I'm just gonna give one last reminder before we start for our participants to keep their phones on mute and submit your questions via chat. And then I would like to go ahead and introduce our first presenter, Jody Belfi with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. And there'll just be a quick pause here as we kind of pass over the screen sharing function from me to her.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Steph, for the introduction and for hosting us today. This was great. As Steph said, my name is Jody Belfi. I'm with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, and I'll be going over information about the Recreational Trails Grant Program and other recreation grants here at OPRD. OPRD's Grants and Community Programs Unit administers 5 recreation grant programs. Of the list on your screen, I'll be going over 4 of these today as they relate to trails, and follow-up questions about specific programs should be directed to the appropriate staff contact, which you can also find on our website under each of these programs. To start with an overview of RTP, so the overall purpose of the Recreational Trails Program, or RTP, is to provide, expand, and improve recreational trail opportunities for public use in our state. RTP is funded by a portion of federal gas tax and is funded through the Federal Highway Administration. Funds are used for both motorized and non-motorized trail projects. We in Oregon receive about $1.6 million a year and are required to split those funds between motorized, non-motorized, and diverse use projects within both of those categories. Eligible projects under RTP include construction of new trails. Major restoration is eligible, which can include bridge replacements, trail reroutes, and other major trail rehab. Trailhead amenities and improvements are eligible under RTP, which can include parking areas and restrooms. Similar facilities are also eligible as part of a water trail project. RTP funds may also be used for equipment purchases when that equipment is dedicated for trail work. Land or easement acquisitions are eligible for trail development purposes. Then we can use up to 5% of our annual funding for safety and education projects related to trail use and user safety. And another 5% of funds may also be used for projects to assess the trail system for accessibility or maintenance improvements. And you can find this and much more information about eligible projects and eligibility of specific costs in the RTP grant manual posted on our website. Federal agencies or eligible applicants for RTP include federal land management agencies, state agencies, cities, counties, park districts, tribes, and also nonprofits who are performing work in partnership with one of these public land managers. As for funding, RTP requires project sponsors contribute at least 20% of the total project cost as match. Match can include cash, in-kind funding, staff time, the value of volunteer labor, and other donations or grants. And then at least 5% of the total project cost must be from a non-federal funding source. The grant minimum for RTP is $10,000. There's no maximum that you can request, but over the last few grant cycles, the average grant award we made was between about $65,000 and $90,000. And the maximum grant awards over these same cycles varied from $150,000 to nearly $400,000 for a grant award. RTP is a fairly competitive grant program, especially for non-motorized and non-motorized diverse use projects. On the left is the scoring criteria currently used by our advisory committee to evaluate all proposals and is based on OPRD's most recent statewide trails plan. And you can read more about these scoring categories in the same grant manual on our website. Well, we at OPRD, we completed otherwise, they score projects based on what you submit in your application. The RTP committee has 10 members and is made up of user representatives for both motorized and non-motorized trail use, as well as federal land management reps and an ADA representative. The upcoming grant cycle opens on, The upcoming RTP grant cycle opens on April 2nd. Updated application materials and guidance will be posted online in February, but for now you can refer to the 2017 manual and materials. I'll be hosting a webinar and a few workshops across the state in March and into early April where I'll go into much more detail about program requirements and the application process. So you can keep your eye on our website for those dates or contact me and I can add you to an email list and I'll send those updated dates to once they're posted. Once the RTP cycle opens, applicants must submit a letter of intent in our online grant system. If you don't have an account, you can register on the OPRD Grants website. The letter of intent is just a simple online form, and once approved, you can access the application questions. Applications are due on June 15th this year. Then the committee meets in October, where applicants will present if requesting over $50,000, and the committee will vote on their funding recommendations. Committee recommendations go to the OPRD Commission, who will vote to approve those projects at their meeting in November 2018. Funding is anticipated in early 2019, and then you'll have a 2-year grant term to complete that project. And that is all on RTP. Next, the Local Government Grant Program is a lottery-funded grant program, also administered at OPRD, and Mark Cowan is the grant coordinator at our office. Local government grants fund public outdoor recreation areas and facilities. Eligible project categories are land acquisitions for public recreation use, development of parks and their facilities, rehab projects, and planning. Types of outdoor recreation facilities eligible for funding include playgrounds, outdoor swimming facilities, fishing and hunting facilities, picnic areas, campgrounds, but more relevant to this audience also include recreational trail projects, bike parks or pump tracks, and water trail facilities. Eligible applicants for local government grants include cities, counties, park districts, and port districts. The match requirement varies between 20% and 50% and is based on population within the city, district, or county. Local government awards approximately $11 million per biennium. OPRD runs an annual grant cycle, typically splitting that $11 million equally over each cycle. When applying for local government, you'll apply for either the small, large, or planning category. Small grants are limited to $75,000 and do not require presentation to the local government committee. Large grants are limited to $750,000 or $1 million if it's a land acquisition, and those do require presentation to the local government committee. And then planning grants are limited to small communities and can range from a park system master plan update to a specific project plan. And planning projects are limited to $40,000 per grant. The 2018 local government grant cycle opened on January 1st and uses the same OPRD grants online application system. Due dates for applications are between April 1st and May 15th, depending on what project type you apply for. There's a workshop scheduled in Salem next Thursday, January 18th, and then a live webinar is scheduled on the 25th of January. So you can visit the local government grant section of our website for more information on that program. Another program, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, is funded through the National Park Service and also administered by OPRD. Michelle Scalise is the grant coordinator for this program. OPRD runs a land and water grant cycle every other year. The 2018 cycle has $3 million available, and that amount is expected to continue each biennium. 40% of funds are available for state agencies, which include state parks, forestry, fish and wildlife, and state lands. The remaining 60% is available for local units of government, park districts, port districts, and tribes. The match requirement for local government is 50%, and eligible project types include land acquisitions for public recreation and development or improvements to park facilities and trails. An important thing to know about land and water funding is that once land and water funds are used in a project site or park, that project boundary must be dedicated to public recreation use forever. Applicants wanting to develop trails with land and water funds may want to consider sites or parks that have already utilized land and water funds, or give extra consideration to constraining any new property with land and water funds. This program also opened for application at the beginning of January. Workshop and webinar were already held this week. So if you missed those and would like more information, the webinar will be posted on our website soon, or you can contact Michelle Scalise at our office. And as I mentioned, the OPRD Trails Plan related to the RTP scoring criteria, local government and land and water are both scored based on the criteria in the 2013 through 17 Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, or SCORP. And this applies to the current 2018 grant cycle and will be updated for the 2019 grant cycles. Lastly, OPRD administers the All-Terrain Vehicle Grant Program. The ATV Grant Program runs on a biennial schedule and typically awards around $7 million in grants. Of those funds, the majority goes to law enforcement in OHV riding areas and operations and maintenance of those areas. And then the remaining 10% is used for land acquisitions, planning and development of or improvements to OHV riding areas and trails. Eligible applicants for ATV include land managers of public OHV riding areas. Development grants can also be awarded to registered nonprofit OHV riding clubs who are performing work in partnership with a public land manager. And then for ATV, a 20% match is required, and the next cycle opens in fall of 2018, and funds will be available in July 2019. So that's all. I know that was quick, but that's all for the OPRD Recreation Grant Programs. If you have questions about RTP that we don't get to today, you can follow up with me or visit our website, and you can find contact information for all of the other OPRD grant coordinators. And thank you.
Jody, we have one quick question that I'm wondering if you're able to address before we before Susan gets started, and that is, it's about the local government grant funding and whether or not that can be received by a city government for a project on federal land near the city.
So local government, it's the eligible applicants are just, so yes, cities, counties, park districts, and port districts. So I'm not sure how it would work if you were proposing to do that work on federal land. Neighboring it within that city, yes, that would be eligible. But you may want to get a hold of Mark Cowan to give some more specifics about that project that you're thinking of. And he can definitely evaluate whether or not that would work.
Great, thank you. And I want to let folks know that you are welcome to continue to share any questions you have for Jody, and as time allows, we will have more Q&A for all of our presenters at the end of the webinar. Also want to let folks know who might not have seen it through the chat window that we are recording this webinar, and we will share a downloadable version of it via a link to an email to everyone who participated, and others as well. And we should have that out by later this week. So with that, I'd invite Susan Peisman from ODOT to get started.
All right. Hi, thanks again, Steph, for organizing. My name is Susan Peisman. I am the ODOT Active Transportation Policy Lead at our headquarters in Salem. My job is around policy and funding for the programs Bike Ped, Sustainability, Transportation Options, Tourism, Recreation, and Safe Routes to School. I'm going to give you guys a pretty big overview. We've had a lot of changes to our various funding programs because of the transportation package that was passed, House Bill 2017, last spring. So while I won't have detail, this is going to be a pretty high-level overview. The other thing, I am sharing my screen. Apparently, my Outlook emails are still popping up, so hopefully I don't get anything embarrassing while I'm talking. So you'll have to forgive those. All right. Oops. My name. Sorry. All right. So Oregon. The Oregon Department of Transportation has modal plans, and we adopted a bicycle and pedestrian modal plan in 2016 that sets the policy foundation for our investments. Specifically around trail funding, our priorities are around transportation commuting functions or economic benefits. For trail funding, we've been using the last several years Connect Oregon dollars, which I'll go into, the State Transportation Improvement Program, which I'll also go into, and then we are actually the pass-through entity from the feds for the recreational trails funding that Jody just mentioned in her program. Some of the examples of trails that we either own or have funded include Historic Columbia River Highway Trail, the I-205 Trail, the Bear Creek Greenway Trail, Tualatin River Greenway Trail, etc. I mentioned the policy because I want to set the context. I know that there's a bunch, kind of an umbrella group of people on the phone right now that are interested in all different types of trails, and I want to set the context about the type of trail that ODOT funds. So we support off-roadway walkways, bikeways that connect communities, provide alternatives to motorized travel, and promote and support walking, biking tourism. Specifically, we've got a regional path designation, so we're looking at trails that are physically separated, connect two or more communities, or a longer path will serve a commuting function or part of a designated walking and biking route, such as the Scenic Bikeway Program. Also, it's important to note that we require that these trails be endorsed by elected bodies along the alignment. We've had a couple of situations with our funds where we haven't had that support, and that has wreaked havoc on the program, specifically the Corvallis to Albany Trail we funded with Connect Oregon dollars. And there was some frustration around that trail, so we're asking for all of the work to be done on the front end. Okay, so what we fund state or local trail projects. They must be ADA accessible, transportation and or tourism focused, and on-road connections. I'm going to stop on this on-road connections piece for a minute. So trails funding is actually, from our standpoint, trails funding is really tough because the majority of our dollars are gas tax dollars. And in Oregon, those are constitutionally restricted to the road right-of-way, where trails are generally outside of the road right-of-way. However, there's additional facilities that are needed in order to connect to trails or for trail crossings of roadways. And because those facilities are on the road right-of-way, there are additional funding pots for those. But I won't go into those specifically. I just wanted to note that those are other pieces that we fund from different pots. What we don't fund soft surface trails with a recreation focus, and we don't fund hiking and mountain biking trails. So again, hardscaping, direct transportation focused. What we don't fund are the mountain biking and hiking trails, as much as I wish we did. So funding opportunities. So like I mentioned, House Bill 2017 was passed in the spring, and some of our more traditional programs that we've been using for trails are going through some transition. So I'm going to talk a bit about kind of the pre-House Bill 2017 and post-House Bill 2017, specifically around Connect Oregon, the STIP, and as I mentioned, Jody already talked about the rec trails set aside that OPRD manages. So Connect Oregon. Connect Oregon pre-House Bill 2017 is a legislatively approved biannual program for focused on multimodal transportation issues outside of the road right-of-way. I mentioned that gas tax dollars are restricted to road right-of-way, so this was a creative fund using lottery dollars that do not have that restriction for those transportation-related projects outside the road right-of-way. It's a competition open to local agencies, and starting in 2013, which was Connect Oregon 5, there was legislation that allowed bike and ped eligibility. So some of the examples of things that we funded on Connect Oregon 4 and 5 and 6 for trails are here. You'll note there's other bike projects at the bottom. So some examples of those include the Flanders Street Bridge in Portland and the Eugene Bike Share were some projects that were funded from Connect Oregon. I make note of that because there are changes to Connect Oregon from House Bill 2017 that specifically sets aside a percentage for bike ped projects. However, they have a designation for a regional path. So where it was open prior to all bike ped projects outside the road right-of-way, the focus of Connect Oregon for bike ped has actually been narrowed to that regional path designation. The other change is that there was a 7% set aside opposed to bike ped projects competing as, it'd be like a trail competing against an airport. There's a specific set aside where all of the trail projects will compete against each other. This may or may not be interesting to other people, but it's very interesting to me. It had been a clean source of funding in terms of just having one funding source, lottery dollars. But now in Connect Oregon, there are multiple funding sources, which create some administrative challenges, I guess, opportunities. Specifically, this is where the much talked about bike tax is going. So the $15 bike tax is going into Connect Oregon along with the vehicle privilege tax, which is a 0.5% sales tax on new cars. This is an important note. In House Bill 2017, there are some earmarked projects, and what that did is the result of those earmarks is that there will be no competition for 17-18. However, the bike ped funds, specific funds, specifically that 15% or $15 bike tax, are reserved for future allocations. So I'm just going to hit on the bike tax really quickly because I know that that is an interest point for people. It is an estimated $1.2 million annual revenue. However, that was a legislative projection, and we won't know the actual numbers from that until the Department of Administrative Services starts to collect that. The money, as I mentioned before, goes into Connect Oregon and is dedicated to trail funding. The bike tax is a point of sale on complete bicycles, over $200 with 26-inch wheels. It started Jan 1, collected quarterly, and administered through ODOT's Transportation Development Division, which is where I am located. So going on to another funding source that had been used for trails, I'm just going to talk about our state Transportation Improvement Program, our STIP. This is basically all of ODOT's transportation money, and previously, before House Bill 2017, in the 15 to 18 and the 18 to 21 cycles, there had been a program, STIP Enhanced, that was open for locals to compete for any type of transportation funding project. So if you had a trail project, you could work through your local area commission of transportation, and you could fund trail projects through our STIP Enhanced program. Again, House Bill 2017 identifies projects for the STIP Enhanced program, and it decreased the overall funding pot, so the future of STIP Enhanced is still to be determined. However, recognizing that the decrease in trails funding from Connect Oregon, because there was no round for 17 to 19, we had asked our governing body, the Oregon Transportation Commission, to set aside a $6 million for trail funding in the 21 to 24 cycle of our STIP. So they had just approved that in December. So we have $6 million forthcoming for an system trails. I didn't put this on the slides because I didn't want it in writing, but I will go ahead and tell the 200 people on this call. Essentially what we're thinking of doing is taking, since the bike tax is going to be held until a balance accumulates, we will look at combining that with the $6 million of the dedicated funds from the 21 to 24 STIP cycle and seeing what a competition for trail funding will look like from that. I don't have more information on this because this was just approved in December. And so I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. Also, I want to note that for bike ped funding from the STIP cycle, it's yet to be determined how those programs are going to get distributed, but if I have my number right here, let's see, where'd my number go? Oh, for the 21 to 24 cycle, it's about $117 million. So it's a significant pot of total amount of funding going for bike ped. Okay. I did also want to touch on Safe Routes to School really quickly. This was another big success out of House Bill 2017. And if you've heard that, so there was $10 million of gas tax dollars dedicated for improvements around school. And before anyone asks me the question, can you use that money for trails around schools? The answer is no, because again, it's gas tax dollars, and that is out, and trails being outside the road right-of-way. However, if you have enough space, if you have a very wide road right-of-way and you could do an off-street trail within that, then yes. I know that's an important distinction. I did want to highlight an opportunity. I mentioned those kind of the access to trails. So projects that would do kind of that dual duty of both serving a school and a trail, such as an improved crossing of a high volume, high speed road, that would be eligible under the Safe Routes to School dollars. And we're in the process of developing that program right now, and more information on a competition will be coming out in the spring, summer of 2018. So in summary, there is no competition for Connect Oregon the next round, so there's no 17 to 19 money. The bike tax will be held until a meaningful balance accumulates. We just recently had $6 million for trails approved in the 21 to 24 STIP, the distribution to be determined, but we're looking at the benefit of running a competition with both the bike tax revenue and that $6 million of trails. And the information will be posted as it becomes available to the ODOT funding program website. So again, thank you so much. My name is Susan Peitzman. If you have any specific questions, I went over a bunch of high-level changes that are happening to our funding programs with not as much detail as we'd like to give you at this point, but we're still working through a lot of what these programs will look like in the future. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. We've got some great questions for you that I hope we have time for at the end of things, but we're running a little bit behind schedule. So I would like us to go ahead and pass the torch to Michelle Woodard of Travel Oregon. And again, folks are welcome to submit questions via the chat feature at any time, and we hope to get to a number of those at the end of the webinar. And Michelle, do we have you on the line? Can I hear audio from you to know you're?
Yes, I'm online.
It's working? Great. Okay.
And are you seeing my stuff now?
Yes, we are seeing and hearing you now.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you, Steph. Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Woodard, and I'm here to speak with you about Travel Oregon's grant opportunities. Just as an overview, Travel Oregon is funded through a statewide lodging tax, and currently 10% of Travel Oregon's budget goes into a competitive grants program. So that breaks down to about $3.1 million a year. So let's look at the programs. Travel Oregon has established a program to make grant awards to eligible applicants for projects that contribute to the development and improvement of communities throughout the state by means of the enhancement, expansion, and promotion of the visitor industry. So develop, improve, enhance, expand, and promote. That's the focus of these grants. We have 3 types of grants based on size. There's a small grant program, which I'll go over first. This is for requests up to $20,000. There's a 10% cash match, which is required. So if you're asking for $10,000, you would need to match with at least $1,000 of cash. So your project minimum cost would be at least $11,000 in that instance. These projects must be completed within a 12-month time frame. Our next cycle is scheduled to open in July of 2018. We did open our initial cycle for small grants last July, and we awarded $400,000 to 29 projects across the state. And the intent of this program is to open it annually. So again, mark July of 2018 on your calendar. Our next program is our medium grants program. This is for requests between $20,000 and $100,000. There's 25% cash match, which is required. Larger scale projects, so we've also increased the time frame for these projects. So there's a 2-year completion time frame for these, and our intent is to open these projects once a biennium, open the cycle once a biennium as well. So we are on schedule to open this coming spring, summer timeframe. So we don't have a hard deadline yet, but keep that in mind because it will be opening soon. And finally, we also have our large grants program. So this is requests over $100,000. There's a 50% cash match required, and these are for projects that need to be completed within a 10-year time frame. This program is different in the fact that it is only opened under the direction of the Oregon Tourism Commission. We did open this program in October of 2017, and our tourism commissioners awarded a $10 million grant that's going to be distributed over the course of the next 4 years. So this program will probably not be open again in the short-term future. So really right now, the focus for you folks would be on our small grant program and our medium grant program. So who can apply for these grants? Well, eligible applicants must be doing business in Oregon. We're talking about local governments, port districts, tribes, and nonprofit entities. A lot of destination marketing organizations, chambers of commerce, visitor and convention bureaus, they're key recipients because of their close tie in working to improve economic impacts of tourism. But that said, if you're a trail association or an outdoor recreation group and you're a registered nonprofit, then you meet our eligibility requirements. So what type of projects are eligible? Well, we touched on this slightly in the previous slide, but eligible projects must provide for the improvement or expansion of the tourism economy in Oregon. So these are tourism grants. If you want to construct a trail, plan for a trail, or maintain a trail, in your application, you need to describe how this will improve the economy, and in particular, how it's going to be valuable for visitors. The other piece is projects are intended to increase the likelihood of visitation from 50 miles outside the local area. Remember this, it's a key point. These are travel and tourism grants, and Travel Oregon considers a visitor to be someone located 50 miles outside your local area. Projects that are too community focused are not going to score as highly in our grant program as projects that can clearly show the connection to visitation. So keep that in mind. Okay, project ideas. So if you're thinking about something along the lines of trail development, you can apply for planning assistance, construction. We have signage, whether it's design, development, or installation, visitor access improvements. We actually awarded funding in September to the Applegate Trails Association in Southern Oregon, and this was to pave an access road and a parking lot to make one of the trailheads that they had accessible. And accessibility can be defined in many different ways. I know ADA accessibility came up earlier, and that's something that we would be open to funding as well. Other ideas can stem from the marketing end, so print and digital collateral. This is if you're trying to promote your trail maps, branding projects. For instance, if you have a system or a network of trails that you want to brand, or how about a project geared towards sustainability? Also in September, we awarded funding to the Trail Keepers of Oregon, and this was to implement a $1 for Gorge Trails Fund. So this project creates a program that collects $1 through online reservations, resort fees, just basically point of sale expenditures at participating businesses in the gorge. And then these collected funds go back towards priority projects or trail works. So we're looking at preserving trails, rebuilding trails. It's Travel Oregon's mission to inspire travel that drives economic development, but it's also our mission to ensure the preservation of Oregon's way of life and its natural places. And I mean, I know I love Oregon and all the amazing things we can see and do and experience here, and I'm sure many and most of you feel the same way. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact that trails and outdoor recreation in general are a good fit for Travel Oregon's grant programs. Here's a few takeaways for you. If you aren't already, please sign up for Travel Oregon's industry e-newsletter. Many of you may already be signed up for this list, but it's a great place to get informed of what's happening, especially through our grant programs as well. You can find the sign up link on every page of our industry website, and you'll see the grants web address, which is up above. So it's industry.traveloregon.com/grants. You'll find that sign up on the sidebar of the website. We also have additional email updates that we send, and this includes updates on outdoor recreation, cycling, destination development. So consider joining one of those email lists as well. We always make our grant guidelines available and our funding announcements through our email lists. So get signed up. Next, if you have a project idea, connect with your regional destination management organization. We call them RDMOs. You'll see the web address on the listing on the screen. It's great to connect with these tourism experts as a resource. Learn if what you're considering is already in the works in your area or if it aligns with the regional goals, and know that the RDMOs have potential funding for you as well. So again, these are tourism dollars. Our RDMOs, especially in the Central Oregon, Willamette Valley, and coastal regions, are looking at starting grant programs that would potentially open the end of this month. So really connect with these regional representatives. Overall, I mean, opportunities are available from us. Please take advantage. You see the website listed above again that houses more information, and you can always reach me with questions as well at grants@traveloregon.com. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. And next up, we have Dan Miller from the National Park Service to talk about their program. And while Dan is getting set up, you have one really, I think, straightforward question for Michelle, which is, does the cash match for grants have to be brought in before grant approval, or can it be received before funding by Travel Oregon?
We like to see it in the budget, so it needs to be listed in the budget, whether it's in your bank account. We haven't been as specific on that. So as long as you have it budgeted and it shows it as cash, if you're waiting for a grant award, so if it's pending on, for instance, an award of another grant, then that's another story where, no, you can't be waiting for pending your cash match on another award. But I guess it goes down a slippery slope. We want to see you having the cash in hand. If you're waiting for another award, then you're probably going to not get funded. But if we see it clearly outlined in your budget and you don't tell us about this other award that you're waiting for, then I guess that would be one way of approaching it. But ideally, you have the cash on hand. Are we going to look at your bank account statements? No.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And Dan, we're ready for you.
Thanks. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Wow, I'm amazed. I started in the trails community in Oregon back in 1996, and back then Pete Bond was the RTP coordinator, and it's amazing to see how things have changed to 2018. Back then, Travel Oregon really had no interest in trails as a serious tourism amenity, And it's amazing to hear how things have changed in Travel Oregon and just how much support they're giving towards trails and recognizing it as a serious amenity for tourism. I'm amazed to see where OPRD has gone in that time. We've got a bike and ped coordinator. I think we might or still have a water trail coordinator. We've got a great person behind RTP, and it's amazing to see the amount of funds and support that are going to trails and trail development in Oregon. For my job, I work in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And by far, Oregon is the most put together state when it comes to trail support and trail development. So you're lucky if you're in the state of Oregon. I want to talk to you about how the National Park Service supports trail development and park and recreation development in the state of Oregon and all over all 50 states and territories. The National Park Service manages gems like Mount Rainier, Crater Lake, Oregon Caves, but we also have duties and responsibilities for working with the American public and helping to bring closer to home recreation and help protecting and planning open spaces, parks, and other outdoor recreation amenities for the American public. Again, my name is Dan Miller, and I work for the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and we are a technical assistance program that works alongside communities and responds to community requests to come in and work on conservation, preservation, and development of outdoor recreation, trails, greenways, open space type projects. So while the other programs that you heard about are actively out there funding and giving support towards your projects, what the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program does is help with planning. So if you have a really good idea of exactly what you want to do on a project and you've got it all mapped out, you've got the cost estimates, all that stuff sort of done, you can just ignore my presentation because you don't need RTCA. What you need to do is be applying for grant funding. If you aren't sure of all the issues, if you need to work with the public, if you need to work with stakeholders, if you need to go through a facilitated planning process, then you might want to check out RTCA. So again, we respond to requests for assistance instead of a grant program, instead of where you apply for a grant and get funds. What you do is apply for assistance. And again, we work on locally led, locally driven projects, and we provide planning, landscape architecture services, and project management. Every project that we do must have a local primary cooperator and some sort of planning group. We put a heavy emphasis on public outreach, public involvement, public engagement, if it makes sense for your project. Here's some examples of the type of work that we've done in the region. We've done a lot of water trail planning all over the state and all over the Pacific Northwest. I put in a few park projects as some examples, and then I'll focus mostly on trail. We've worked in Hood River County, helping them in their trail planning efforts in Post Canyon and all of their lands throughout the county. We've worked in Oak Ridge, Sisters. We've recently done a rail trail in Yamhill County. And then we work on larger scale regional bike and ped plans like the Blue Mountain Regional Plan. So here's what makes a good project for RTCA, what makes a good application. It needs to be clear, it needs to be realistic, obtainable. It needs to be on publicly owned land or have landowners willing to give written permission. We like to see 3 or more letters of commitment, not just of support saying, you know, hey, we think this is project is a good idea because it's relatively easy to get letters of support. We like to see some letters of commitment saying, hey, not only do we think this trail is a good idea, but we're willing to engage in the planning process and be a part of it. The best applicants always contact RTCA prior to applying. Our applications are due at the end of June. Sometimes that changes into July, but you can go to our website, nps.gov/RTCA, and you can read all about the program, and then you can contact your local RTCA staff person. In Oregon, that's me. I'm based out of the Portland, Vancouver field office, but we've got folks in Seattle and in San Francisco as well that service this area. And that is it for me.
Great, thank you, Dan. And if you can go ahead and get ready to transfer screen share back to me, I will do a quick overview of a few more options or a few more opportunities that are out there.
Susan, did I switch that over to you? I hit stop.
Yeah, I'm just hitting the button to get my screen shared now. It took me a moment to relocate it. All right, I wanted to quickly go over the Federal Lands Access Program in a little bit more detail because it's a really big one, and then I'll briefly mention some other things to look into. Federal Lands Access Program, or often frequently called FLAP, is the Federal Highway, is administered through the Federal Highway Administration, with the other key committee members being the Oregon Department of Transportation and Association of Oregon Counties. And the purpose is to provide safe and adequate transportation access to and through federal lands. So eligible projects must be, on, adjacent to, or provide access to federal lands. And, highways, bridges, roads, trails, and transit systems are all eligible projects. And there's also a wide range of eligibility in terms of it. The program can fund capital improvements like construction, enhancements. So that, that could be things like, trailheads, kiosks, signage, those kinds of things. Surface preservation, safety, transit. So if you're working on a project to get people to the trailhead, as well as planning and research. So who can apply for this pot of funding? You need to be working in partnership with the federal land management agency that you're accessing, and along with the entity with vested title or maintenance responsibility. So i.e. the person who has jurisdiction over the land. So if you're not working on the federal land, but working on a trail that might go through county land or whatever kind of jurisdiction land to access, you need both parties to apply together. These are large grants. The minimum grant is $100,000, and the match requirement is 10.27%. And I do believe that same match requirement isn't the same if it is being characterized as primarily a safety project, but for the most part, match is required. There's a round has just opened with applications due April 6th, and there is a webinar on January 18th coming right up where you can learn about this program in detail. So once again, keep an eye out for that webinar on January 18th. You don't have to register for that in advance. I believe you can just sign up and join. But if you look up Federal Lands Access Program Oregon, or look at that link that's on the bottom of this slide, you can find that information on how to join that webinar. And then other programs to explore, generally for smaller grants. is definitely to look at your local metropolitan planning organization, parks district, soil and water district. Sometimes there are small community grants available, especially for our webinar participants who might be on the kind of nonprofit or volunteer side of things. If you're looking at a small scale project or programming, you know, locally is another place to look. The Rails to Trails Conservancy has a Doppelt Family Trail Development Fund, and so these would be competing with folks nationally for grants of $5,000 to $35,000, and those are specifically focused on rail trail or multi-use trails. And then also a lot of the private outdoor industry has their own grant programs, so you might look into places like REI, Keen Effect, Patagonia, North Face Explore Fund, etc. Some of those programs fund infrastructure, so fund, you know, actual construction projects, and others of them fund programmatic elements, or there's often a desire to see kind of those things combined, like getting youth or volunteers or different communities engaged in a maintenance or development project as well, are often good fits. So just important to get the lay of the land. Those are often smaller grants as well, kind of in the maybe $5,000 to $20,000 range. But those are generally projects that nonprofits are eligible to apply for. And let's see, I'm going to bring my chat window back. Because for the final part of our hour here, I want to go back to some questions that we already have for some of our earlier presenters, and also let folks know you still have a few more minutes. If you're sitting with a question, you can share it via chat. And so I'm going to go back and start with a couple of questions for Jody. And the first question is, would restoration on a trail in a WSA be eligible? And
hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, a WSA, you said?
That is and I have a follow-up question. I'm not sure if it's from the same person, about a soil and water conservation district. So I'm not sure if that's, I'm not familiar with the acronym.
Yeah, I might
WSA.
need that clarified. I'm not familiar with WSA.
Wilderness Study Area.
Okay.
A few folks, thankfully answering that question for us. Thank you, helpers.
Yeah. So I'm not familiar with anything that would prevent you from doing that, but when it comes to wilderness areas, it would just have to be within the existing wilderness restrictions on any trail work. But yes, generally restoration is eligible.
Okay, and then also a question, if a soil and water conservation district would qualify for a local government grant fund or local government grant.
Ooh, that's a good question. That I'm actually not sure of. I know they talk about other government units within local government grant programs, so it's possible. But I think you would have to reach out to Mark Cowan again on that one, that specific of a question. No, sorry, I can't help more on that one.
All right, and a couple of questions for Susan from ODOT. The first question is, can funding from the new bike tax be used for mountain bike trails?
The answer to that one is no. It's in legislation that it must be for that regional path designation that I identified. So that's not an easy one to change. That would have to be legislation, but right now we have an ORS that requires it to be for regional paths.
And we also have a clarifying question about that term of regional paths. Is that an ODOT designation, or are these the regional trails designated by OPRD or by the Oregon Parks and Recreation?
It is a criteria from ODOT as identified in the Oregon Bike and Ped Plan. I can go into more detail on that if you need. Connecting to communities. Oh, hey, hold on a second. Do you have any other questions for me? I'm losing my conference here.
Yeah, does ODOT have a, oh, I think this is another repeat of kind of the designation of this regional pathway and what that means compared to the regional trails, how that's different from the
Oh, yeah,
trails.
okay.
That's the criteria.
Yeah, hold on. Let me pull up my PowerPoint real quick. So it's a physically separated path that connects 2 or more communities, or it's a longer path, like greater than 10 miles. It serves a commuting function or part of a designated walking and biking route, such as a scenic bikeway, and it's endorsed by elected bodies along the alignment. So that is our criteria for regional path designation. And the policy is in the bike ped plan, and it's also identified in the Connect Oregon legislation.
And Dan, we have a question for you as well from a participant who says, recent reports have stated that the Interior Department has adopted a new screening process for the discretionary grants it makes to outside groups, instructing staff to ensure those awards promote the priority of the Trump administration. And we have this participant is wondering if this also seems to require grant review from staff to submit grants or cooperative agreements to Secretary Zinke's office. So I'm wondering if you can speak to if there's any changes there that might impact the RTCA program or other NPS programs.
This is the first I've heard of this. I haven't heard anything about this.
This is for a question for Dan.
I was like, that's what I was like, wait, me? Sorry about that.
Wow, way to ask that question and put me on recording. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I have not heard any direction for RTCA. You submit to the program leader, who is in San Francisco. She's my direct boss, and the set of applications that we can accept based upon our workload is then signed off by the regional director, who is also in San Francisco. So that the way of doing business will continue to do so unless we get direction otherwise.
All right. Thank you for responding.
That was come on, that was a super boring administrative question, people. There's got to be something a little more interesting.
Well, we are at the end of our time, but I really want to thank all of our presenters. I hope that our participants feel like they know where to go with any remaining questions that they have. And I also want to thank Hillary Sager from Travel Oregon and Travel Oregon for their support to use the platform for this webinar and support this work. We have recorded the webinar, so I hope to be sending out an email both to all of our participants and others as well, with a link where they can download it if there's anything you want to return to. And I wanted to let folks know that this webinar happened in part to input that was given at the 2017 Oregon Trail Summit about what was needed from future kind of convening and collaboration efforts across the state. So I see this as an early project of the Oregon Trails Coalition that is currently under development. So stay tuned for more opportunities and to stay tuned to start seeing kind of more about the Oregon Trails Coalition, including another 2018 Oregon Trails Summit, which right now we think will likely land the first week of October. So invite folks to get in touch with me directly about that, and also would always love to hear from folks about what you would like to see from other webinar and training opportunities of a statewide broad trails organization. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and keep an eye on your email for a recording of the webinar and other future info. Thanks, everybody.